When I say the word propaganda, many of you are probably thinking of the many posters from World War II that we even have a collection of in our College of DuPage library. In fact, propaganda has been used throughout history in many different forms. In his book, How Propaganda Works, Stanley writes, "For thousands of years, propaganda has influenced people of many nations and beliefs to act upon and join some political agenda. The roots of its power lie in loaded language and imagery to manipulate the public's emotions and lead them to action. I am going to discuss how propaganda played a key role in a few different periods throughout art and even made an everlasting impact on history." One of the periods in art that we see propaganda is in the period of Romanticism. This period began in the late 1700s, lasted to the 1800s, and had a large focus on emotion, individualism, and the artist's passion. During this time, the world was going through an industrial revolution and many political revolutions. These revolutions also sparked a change in art and began to focus on the artist's political view and agenda. At the time, a lot of propaganda was coming out of France. The big French Revolution had ended, but the country was still torn and under a monarchy. In the following years, there were many coalitions and smaller revolutions as the people fought for their rights and equality. As artists reflect the times in which they live, we start to see art that reflects the political feuds and anti-government propaganda. One of these artists is a painter by the name of Eugene Delacroix. His most famous painting is Liberty Leading the People from 1830, reflecting the Second French Revolution. In this painting we can see the goddess of liberty standing tall in a mound of bodies, the fallen, holding a musket in one hand and the flag of the revolution high in the air. Behind her is the revolutionaries made up of a variety of social classes. This artwork became a symbol of freedom and honored the people who gave their lives to stand against the monarchy. It fits the standard of beauty for this period because it is a formal painting and well done and carries a message. Another artist from this period was Honoré Daumier. According to Artable's page on Honoré Daumier, he was best known for his caricature work, and he used the classic caricature techniques of physical absurdity to lay bare the cruelty, unfairness, and pretensions of the 19th century French society and politics. One of his earliest works was a lithograph that he published in 1831 titled Gargantua. In this drawing we can see King Louis Philippe distastefully drawn sitting on his throne, having the gold of those who oppose him fuel his greed, and he defecates on the titles of the House of the Peers. This was one of the first political cartoons of its time, and it ended up getting Daumier 6 months in jail. The next and most famous point in history for propaganda falls under social realism. According to the Art Stories page on social realism, it takes place from 1929 to about the mid-50s and had a lot of focus on painters and printmakers who captured and drew attention to the everyday conditions of the working and poor. During this period, the U.S. stock market crashed and sent the world into a depression. Later in the period, World War II ravages the world. Many countries were involved, millions of lives were lost, and parts of the world were destroyed. Specifically in America, thousands of young men were being shipped overseas, and all back home were doing their part to assist the United States in the war. Transitioning into this period, we see a change in propaganda. First, the artwork is not traditional and formal paintings like in the past, but more casual and cartoonish like Daumier's early work. This was done for a few reasons. The posters were created with a simple message for the public, no deep thought or meaning behind it. The posters were also flashy to catch the eye of most people, even children. They were meant to be put everywhere for everyone to see. Another difference is that the majority of propaganda during this period is pro-government and war. It was used to create a sense of nationalism and pride. Arguably one of the most famous pieces of propaganda from this time is the "We Can Do It" poster produced by J. Howard Miller in 1943. While all the men were away at war, women were left to fill in the workforce which they traditionally didn't do. This poster was hung in factories all around the country to inspire women to work hard in the factories to support and end the war which their husbands and sons were off fighting. There are a few other pieces that show the uglier side of propaganda. These two are called "This is the Enemy" and "Is He Your Child?" Just like the first one, these are both done in a cartoon style but have a lot of loaded language. The one is very racist and both tug on emotion. They drive people towards a way of thinking and hate. Last for this period we have an artist by the name of Tom Lee. His art was published in Time magazine and focused on capturing the reality of war. In many of his pieces, the horrors of battle are depicted and show explosions, bloody bodies, and death. According to the Time article, A Painter's View of World War II by Ronk and Rothman, In September 1944, when the U.S. 1st Marine Division invaded the island of Palau, Lee was there for the bloody battle. He produced one of his most recognizable works, that 2,000-yard stare. And noted on the image, Lee wrote, "Two-thirds of his company has been killed or wounded, but he is still standing, so he will return to attack this morning. How much can a human being endure?" His work doesn't follow the trend of pro-war, and it's not exactly anti-government, but capturing and sharing the horror of war could show the public what the government isn't and turn them away from the war efforts. Finally, we have our contemporary period, or our current art. In this period, we have a lot of artists using a variety of materials to work with themes of global influence, cultural diversity, and the advancing world. Also in this period, the aesthetic lies more in the meaning of the work rather than its physical appearance. There's a lot going on in the world, and more of the contemporary propaganda is aimed at governments rather than wars. As we shift into contemporary, there are quite a few changes in how propaganda is used and how it looks. Nowadays, propaganda is widely used for anti-government, and whatever small amount of pro-government propaganda is criticized. Propaganda also continues to stray from classical paintings, continues to use cartoons, but also includes more activist art forms like graffiti. One of the most famous propaganda artists of this time is street artist Banksy. The first piece is, "If you repeat a lie enough, it becomes politics." This piece shows how a contemporary artist is using his power to call out and draw attention to corrupt politics. The government often keeps things hidden from the public and lies about many details. Another one of his works is C&D, or commonly known as Soldier Painting Piece. According to the article 124 Amazing Banksy Graffiti Artworks found on Canvas Art Rocks, this piece was done back in 2003, just a few blocks from the House of Parliament in London, which broke the law stating that there shall be no protest within a certain distance of their government facility. Just by the placement of his work, he is making a statement about freedom of speech and the government. As far as the content of the work, it can be interpreted that he is speaking out on how the government dehumanizes people and uses them as weapons in war, or that the work is focused on the irony of war as we see the soldiers holding a gun and painting the symbol of peace. This work really shows the beauty of contemporary art because it was created in an unconventional way, and most importantly, it has deep meaning that is even tied to the action of it being created. Through my research, I found many things interesting about propaganda. The first thing is how far propaganda dates back and its early forms. It's not just posters with slogans, but full-fledged paintings from the 1800s that hold a lot of symbolism. Another thing is the depth and how broad propaganda has become. I wasn't aware of all these things that are considered to be propaganda, and so many things today outside of war are now also considered propaganda. In conclusion, propaganda has deep roots in history. It gets people emotionally involved and can cause them to take action. It comes in many forms, but it still gets the job done.